Okay. It's probably not going to work because it never does. Okay. Let's see. Hopefully he's requesting me. Oh, there you are. How do I get this to work? Oh, go live.
What's going on?
Yay, it worked!
It did. Have you had issues before on Instagram Live?
Every time. I don't know what my... I can't figure it out.
Like they say, you have to be smarter than the object you're dealing with. That's usually my issue.
Oh,
That's usually my issue.
yeah. Probably never going to technology. In all hope. But so much for doing this. I kind of just felt like why not use the opportunity to let someone who wants to speak and say what they want to say, just to have this platform. This is my dog, Milo.
Hey, Milo.
He's gonna just be chill the whole thing. But yeah, I mean, feel free to take it away, talk as long as you want. How do I turn off comments? That's probably a good thing to do.
Um,
I should do that. Turn
I
off
don't.
out right now. Okay, cool.
So it's funny, Lily. I'll start with this as you introduce your dog Milo. Well, first off, I'm Emmanuel Acho. Played 4 years in the National Football League. Now I'm a sports broadcaster. But I really, and I've started thinking about the social issues and trying to figure out, like, how can we fix what's going on in America?
Yeah.
Because, like, I'm a black man, you're a white woman. Those two things are like oil and water seemingly right now. So how can we address those issues? And you know what I realized? There's a lack of exposure. That's what it comes down to. It's a lack of exposure. So I'm first generation American. I grew up without any dogs, right? I grew up with no Milos in my life.
Sure.
And so as a kid, I once got attacked by a dog. And so now as a 30-year-old man, I can't decipher when walking through the street the difference between a dog that's a threat and a dog that's just like a friendly pet. And I say that's the same issue in our society, is that white people have grown up without being around black people, Lily. And so white people can't decipher between a black person that's a threat and a black person that used to play in the NFL and actually is extremely well educated. Black people can't decipher between a white girl that's a racist and might call the cops on me in Central Park and a white girl that is actually just a fun, loving, good spirit. And I think it's all because of a lack of exposure and education. So what I've tried to do is take this time to expose my white friends who have been so worrisome of asking questions. Like, some of my friends have been like, so do you prefer to be called black or African American? And it's like some of them don't even know like how we want to be addressed. And I in my video on my Instagram page, which by the grace of God has now gotten like 13 million views across 3 different platforms. It's really spoke to a lot of people, which has been touching. I addressed 4 major questions, which I just wanted to do on your live for people that haven't watched. So the 4 questions I hear asked so often by so many of my white friends, and I'm sure many of y'all who have tuning in, why do black people care more about white on black crime than black on black crime? How come black people can say the N word, but I can't? How come y'all are rioting? And so I'll start with the riots, Lily, if I can. I put it like this. Black people, we don't want to get to this point. That's not the case. Like, we don't even want the world to have gotten to this point. And it's not just black people that are rioting, it's several. But in the 1960s, like the peaceful protests, they tried that and it didn't work. In 2000, like they tried that and it didn't work. And so now it's a matter of like, hey, peace hasn't been working. Let's try to change it up. Lily, when you think about grief, and like you, I'm sure, and we all have, anybody watching this, there are 5 stages of grief, and one of which is anger.
Yep.
And anger sometimes doesn't know how to express itself.
Sure.
When my mom lost her older sister, I was a kid and my aunt had passed. I was about 10 years old, and I open the door and I come outside because I hear my mom wailing, and she's throwing her body into a wall. And I'm like, what's wrong? And my dad tells me that my mom's sister had died. 20 years later, thinking back on that moment, I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Why would you injure yourself? Why would you cause yourself harm? But I realized emotions sometimes don't know how to express themselves. And if I'll use one more analogy that I hope so many of your followers can resonate with. I'm biking in Lake Austin the other day because it's COVID. And if you want to stay fit, you better learn how to bike. And so I'm biking in Lake Austin the other day, Lily, and there's like a white girl 15 meters ahead of me. And I'm like, hey, on your left. And she doesn't hear me. And so I get 10 meters away and I'm like, hey, on your left. And she had her headphones in, so she doesn't hear me. And so Lily, I get 5 meters away and I'm like, on your left. And she still doesn't hear me. And then finally, as I pull up next to her, I'm like, on your left, and we collide. And Lily, I say that that's the same thing African Americans have been going through. In the 1960s, Lily, they were like, we're repressed, and nothing happened. They didn't change the course of action. And so 20 years later, Black people are like, hey, we're oppressed, and nothing happened. And again, we're oppressed. And finally, in 2020, we've seen the collision of races. And this is the most racial turmoil we've been in. So to your viewers, a lot of them have asked, because they've been in my comments, in my email saying, hey, how do you define white privilege? Like, my life has been hard. How the heck are you going to tell me that I'm privileged? And I say this, Lily, white privilege isn't saying your life hasn't been hard. Sure. It's saying that your skin color hasn't contributed to the difficulty of your life.
For sure.
And I hope a lot of people watching this hear that, because again, if I'm running a race with somebody and I had and the start official, they hold me back for the first 200 yards or the first 200 seconds. And now they're like, okay, Emmanuel, you're free to go run. That's not a fair race. And while in our life, we all run one figurative lap, right? Like you run a lap, I run a lap, and that lap is equivalent to our lifetime. Several white people got a head start because our ancestors. And it's no problem with that. It's just acknowledging the head start. Think about it like this. When wealth was being acquired in the late 1800s and 1900s, like Black people were slaves in the early 1800s. When the banks in the 1950s really started giving out credit to buy houses, Black people couldn't get credit. And so I kind of tried to address that's really the white privilege conversation. Yeah. The other conversation that I've heard so much about is the N-word, right? Like that. And that's a sensitive topic. So for those tuning in, this one was really hard for me. So the N-word in our day, in modern day, we don't think anything of it. We hear it in rap songs. We see it in TV shows. It's not a big deal. But when you realize that word is synonymous with hatred, oppression, and execution, think about that for a second. But we don't think about that because in our day, we just hear it in hip hop culture. And so I'm like, that word was a governor of Arkansas in 1960s. He said, whites and N-words will never go to school as long as I'm alive. So you and I would never have been able to go to school. And this wasn't a long time ago. Yeah. This was just 50, 60 years ago. And so white people took a word that was meant for evil. And Black people turned it into a term of endearment. And so I say that, that's why white people can't and shouldn't say that word, is because you really got to know the meaning behind it. And then Lily, lastly, kind of expounding on this, Black on Black crime versus white on white crime, white on Black crime. How come so many people, so many African Americans, they only care about white on Black crime? And I just simply submit this. When a Black person commits a crime, they get punished. That's what we've seen. When a white person commits a crime against a Black person, they get off. Ahmaud Arbery, everybody saw that. Ahmaud Arbery, what most people don't realize, and I'm sure several of your viewers do, some may not, remember this. The murderers, the people that killed him, they were free for 2 months. It's only that we saw the footage, Lily, that now got them arrested. So imagine, Lily, what we haven't seen on camera.
Right.
It's.
Yes, that said, what did he say? It was racism has always been here. It's just now being filmed.
And now it's being filmed. And I think about the Amy Cooper incident in Central Park. Obviously, you saw that one, I'm assuming.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah, you saw that. And so that was the white woman, for those that are watching, that she had her dog was off a leash in Central Park in New York, and it's illegal to walk your dog off a leash. So a black man, a bird watcher, actually was recording her, telling her, "Hey, can you leash your dog?" And she says, "Stop recording me, or I'm going to call the cops and tell them you're threatening my life."
yep,
And he said, "Call the cops." So she calls the cops and she starts yelling and screaming, "There's a black man threatening my life." He was doing no such thing. That story went viral. If y'all haven't seen it, see it. Lily, I was reminded 1955, Emmett Till, the 14-year-old black man who was accused of flirting with a white woman in a store. He was mutilated, beaten, and executed. In 1956, the two white men who killed him, they got off. They admitted that they did it because they knew they couldn't be tried due to double jeopardy. Lily, in 2017, the white woman who accused Emmett Till of flirting with her, she recanted her story. She said it didn't happen.
right.
Emmett Till would be, I believe, in his early 80s right now. And so, Lily, so many things that we see far-fetched. I'm like, no, these are real issues. And I guess I'm privileged, one, that you would bring me on because you have a following and a fan base that can just learn from a genuine conversation. Like, the beautiful part of this is you're a white woman. I'm a black male. Like, we're not supposed to get along. We're not supposed to, in theory and on paper, we're not supposed to be able to have real conversation like this. But all it takes is a little bit of education.
Yeah.
Like, even in our, if I can put our business out there, like even in our DMs today, I found out you and I have the same book agent.
Yep.
like what? Like, I had no idea. I'm on the phone with my book agency and they're like, "Hey, Emmanuel, you should consider this, consider that." I was like, "Hey, I might go on Instagram Live with Lily." They're like, "Wait, really? We represent her." And so, like, those of y'all who are watching, it's up to us. It's up to the next generation to break down these barriers. It's up to you, it's up to me, and it's up to everybody viewing to realize, you know what don't I know?
Sure.
I have to realize that there are so many things I don't know about someone of the opposite sex,
Yep.
about someone of a different complexion. And I take it upon myself to help educate so many of my white brothers and sisters. Like, one of my white friends, she thought the phrase "black don't crack" was just like an idiom, like it was a figure of speech. I was like,
Mhm.
no, like, we have darker skin, therefore we absorb the sun better, therefore in theory we age better. Like,
Yeah.
it's not just like a figure of speech, it's a scientific thing. So this is the beautiful part, one, of social media, but two, of world right now, because you as a white woman and me as a black man are actually defying the odds, and I think we're doing what society needs, which is to see conversation.
I think it's an interesting point that you like we're really supposed to get along, but also how what did you said that my brain's fried. Forgive me. Uh,
I get it.
what was I gonna say? Okay, keep talking. It'll come back.
The real, the
Oh,
real,
oh, what I was gonna say,
please.
is that I think there's a lot of people who aren't willing to ask the questions.
Yes,
I think it's
yes.
along with that. Again, it's like there's so many posts going around right now, but the one that says like if it's a conversation that you're afraid to have, it's a conversation you're supposed to have. And it's a matter of just starting that conversation and asking that uncomfortable question. And even if the
Hmm.
comfortable, at least you're learning. And obviously, as a white woman, I know that I will never understand what it's like to be racially profiled the way that a black person would. And I'm just trying to educate myself as well as educate the people watching.
Yeah.
I don't know what I can't say that I have an all white fan base. I don't really know what my fan base is. Like, I don't really pay attention to it.
Well, you muted the comment, so like we.
Well, people told me that I should because one, when people can rewatch this, it's very distracting to have comments.
Ah, smart.
Yeah, and also people tend to bring up things that aren't relevant or important, and it hates me when people start about just irrelevant shit. Trying to talk about something really important, it's like stop trying to ask. So it's totally, it has nothing to do with you or anything. It's just a matter of people are annoying sometimes. Respect.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think like for those who are watching, everybody's like, well, what can I do to help? What can I do to help? And I'm gonna give y'all the secret. Action doesn't have to be active.
Okay.
It's simple. Action can be passive. What do you mean by that? We're simply having a conversation where you're speaking and I'm listening, and I'm speaking and you're listening. And that passive action is actually what will make all the difference in our world. Like to just simply be able to say, I don't understand. Can you help me understand?
Sure.
And I understand like some of the conversations are uncomfortable. Like even I walked over to two of my white friends' house yesterday or a couple days ago, and their 3-year-old son, he wouldn't give me a hug, and I've known him since the day he was born. And the dad came up to me a couple hours later and was like, "Hey, I didn't know if he didn't hug you because he hadn't seen a black guy in a while." The wife was mortified. She
Yeah.
was like, "Why would you say that to him?" And I was like, "Man, you know what? I appreciate you saying that
Yeah.
because that means you're aware."
Yeah.
And the wife didn't want to bring it up, my dearest friend, because like she was worried. But I was like, no, this is how conversations have to start.
Mm.
Like, hey, I didn't know if my son didn't hug you because he hadn't seen a black man. Because now I'm challenging him. We'll change that, bro.
Sure.
Because if at 3 years old, your son doesn't know how to act around somebody that has darker skin, your white son, imagine what will happen at 13 years old. And imagine what will happen at 30 years old. And Lily, it's all cyclical. Like people think there's some grand fix. I got to storm Washington, D.C. I have to change legislation. And that's really not the case. You just have to change like your house. The beautiful thing is I got an email from a 19-year-old girl who lived in Utah. And she was like, my dad's never had these racial conversations with me because like he doesn't acknowledge it. And I've now realized how privileged I am. And I'm like, thank you.
Yeah.
Because you will change the next generation. Like it's, oh, Lily, I'll give you this analogy. You know when, and y'all know this when you're watching it, when you run the bath, like when you run the bath water, you hit a water fountain that hasn't been run for a while. At first the water comes out and it's dirty. It's just kind of like brown and stuff. And then it starts to get a little bit clearer. And then after running the water for about 10 seconds, it's completely clear. That's what's going to happen in our life. Right now, our society, it's dirty. You know, like it's dirty with racial inequality, with racial stereotypes. But if your viewers, if my fan base, if you and I find a way to continue to change the next generation, the water is going to get cleaner and cleaner and cleaner. And if those of y'all who are watching, and if we don't want to see these kinds of riots happen again, let's fix the cause. It's like, Lily, if you get sick because you're eating a certain type of food, you're allergic to Mexican food. Sure, you can like keep taking medicine after every time you eat it,
Sure.
Or you can just fix the problem.
Right. You could just stop.
Right? Or you can just stop eating Mexican food. And now, mind you, Mexican food is bomb, and I live in Texas, so I ain't telling nobody to stop eating Mexican food, okay? Them enchiladas go crazy. But I will say this, like, we're trying to put a Band-Aid on things. We have to get stronger legislation. We have to make, like, these laws a lot more stringent. No, just fix the problem. Yeah. Just learn how to understand one another. Like, just be able to have a conversation like you and I are having right now.
Yeah, for sure.
I guess what has been your sense in the midst of all this chaos and madness? Like, what have your sentiments been, and why did you even feel the need to kind of bring someone on to talk about it?
I mean, I think I felt ashamed of my white privilege and the fact that maybe I'd never really stopped to acknowledge it. And I thought, okay, I want to be on the right side of history here. You know, it's not enough to not be racist. You have to be anti-racist.
Yeah.
Act on that and be vocal about it and not just be like, oh, people know I'm not racist. It's like, no, let's act on it.
People know I'm not racist.
And I thought it was truly the least I can do to offer. Like, what do I have to offer? Okay, I have a platform of people who are willing to listen. So let me use that. And I asked on Twitter if people could tell me the names of Black activists who would like to come on my page. And someone actually messaged, they were like, I don't think it's appropriate to call them black. Like, I don't know if you should say. I was like, but here's the thing. I'm like, okay, you're making the term black out to be derogatory.
Mm-hmm.
Not like society
Not at all.
has told you, like, oh, don't, it's African American.
Yes.
Because you've put black people.
Correct. Lily, I gotta chime in. Let me interject, because here's the thing. We have to start having conversations and stop exclusively listening and reading like history books. Because a history book will leave you hella confused.
Sure.
Right? A history book will make you wonder, do I say black or do I say African American? Where having a conversation with me, Emmanuel Acho, will tell you, nah, bro, like, just say black. I can't tell you how many of my NFL friends have called me, hey, Emmanuel, I want to release this statement. And I'm talking like Super Bowl winning friends. Hey, I want to release this statement. Can you proofread it? Like, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about this? I respect them because they're getting my opinion before they release something publicly. But that's what it's about, is like, have a conversation with the source. I can ask my friend, hey, how was that movie? How was that show? How was that Lily was in? Or I can just go watch.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? And so often we're like, oh, how was that movie she was in? Rotten Tomatoes didn't give it a lot of stars.
Sure.
And it's like, just go watch, And I encourage everybody, like, get off the bench. Stop just taking someone else's word for it. Don't watch a movie and be like, well, I know black guys who wear chains, they're hoodlums.
Sure.
Or like, man, they say blondes are dumb. Like, this, stop with the stereotypes and really get experience. Let me ask you this, Ali, because I've been curious. How would you have defined, or how do you define white privilege? And how would you even acknowledge that, like, maybe I am privileged?
I think it was an interesting, again, referring to all the Instagram. It's someone, who called out, okay, so it was Blackout Tuesday the other day.
Yeah.
Silenced your social media. And I still saw people posting things to me that seemed extremely irrelevant, and selfies or whatever. And it became clear that if you are able to go through your life ignoring, the movement, let's say right now, if you're able to just go on with your life without acknowledging Black Lives Matter, that is privilege, not directly affecting. And so who are right now posting beauty shots and whatever the hell they make.
Yeah.
That's because they have the privilege to not worry about what's happening.
Yeah. Like, you're so right. I called one of my friends. She's a house designer, an interior decorator here in Austin, and she had been posting so many houses last Friday and Thursday, and then finally she called and like, is that insensitive? And I was like, it is. But I'm like, it's not insensitive because you're being intentionally mean. I just don't get, how in the world are you able to post anything other than what's going on?
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't fix my fingers to make a football post right now. And I'm an ESPN analyst by trade. Like, all I do is talk about sports. I can't even bring it in me to retweet a tweet because of the sheer chaos and destruction. And like, you mentioned Black Lives Matter. And so I kind of I don't know if I addressed this earlier, because my head is also spinning. So like, the Black Lives Matter, all lives matter thing. So many people have brought that up. And I'll say it like this. Well, if you pull up into your neighborhood if you pull up into your neighborhood and you see one house is burning, and so you pick up your phone and you call the fire department, you wouldn't say, hey, all these houses are on fire. No, you would say, hey, there's a house burning. Can you come fix it? In the NFL, where I played for 4 years, every October was Breast Cancer Awareness Month. That's not to undermine other forms of cancer. We're just spotlighting this one form of cancer. And so, like, when people say Black Lives Matter, it's not meant to be rude. It's not meant to undermine any other life. It's just saying, hey, there's this one house that's burning down. And so while, yes, there are several other houses in the neighborhood and they're all dignified in their own right, can we put the fire out in the one house that's burning down? And when I say burning down, I mean, like, Black people are dying at the hands of police brutality. And let me say this, which I haven't actually ever said yet publicly. There's a quote that stuck with me from a book in high school. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. That means that, like, power corrupts, and if you have absolute power, you for sure gonna get corrupted.
Mm,
Police officers, for the most part, they have absolute power. You're wearing a badge and you got a gun.
yeah,
Like you have all the power in the world. So of course several of them are gonna be corrupt,
sure.
right? Not all of them by no means, but when if you give anybody ultimate power, of course there's gonna be corruption. So it's not exclusively just like a police trying to kill black people issue. It's a corruption issue and it's a race issue.
Yeah. I mean, it explains why our White House corrupt.
Power. It'll do it to you. What do you think? Because I'm sure there's so many white people that are trying to figure out what are their role in all of this. What do you feel is your role in the midst of all this chaos and trying to bring peace
Yeah.
in this world?
I think it's interesting because I had a chat yesterday with Kenidra, who's been a protester and a big supporter of this movement since she was 13. And she had said, like, something that really angered her was when she went to a protest and she saw white people speaking for her. And it was
Yeah.
that struck me because I would never think to try to lead the charge of this movement because this is like, although I can like support and do the best I can, it's like, it's almost, I don't want to say this is not my fight, but it's
Hmm.
my voice is not as important as the black voices right now. And so whatever I can do to amplify black voices, because I can't speak for you, I guess.
Hmm.
So my voice is not going to have the same impact as your voice or Kanidra's or anyone else that, I can have on my Instagram to talk about this because I'm a white woman. And,
Yeah.
I just don't have the same impact. It doesn't mean as much, me going, I don't know. I think it's just like, I'm trying to be an ally. I'm trying to offer up what I can, which is my platform. I'm trying to show my support and put it out there that, like, I want your voice to be heard.
Hmm.
Like I said, I think the best way to go about this is for anyone who's in my position who has, and Bo Burnham, who's, I like to call him a friend. He is a comedian. He's a director. He posted earlier. He was like, if you're like me and have, more money than you know what to do with, like a
Yeah.
amount that you don't need, put it to good use. And I think
Yeah.
that is also saying something. I think if you have the means, even if it's a small amount, just feeling like you're actively participating in this movement for the better.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it does. It does. I will expound on something you said because to a degree I disagree. I think that the black voice is more inspirational right now because ours is more heartfelt. Like the pain is so real.
Yeah.
But I would argue the white voice is more powerful.
Okay.
And there's a difference, right? I would argue like your voice is more powerful than mine, not by number of followers, but because you'll infiltrate spaces I never can.
Okay. Yeah.
If you want to get a sports message across, oh, best believe, have me tweet it.
Sure.
But if I want to get a message across to white people, well, I might not be the best person to have tweeted. And so while I think right now, black voices are extremely inspirational and they are extremely driven, I think that it's the spaces, it's the voices of yours and so many of my white friends, my white brothers and sisters. Y'all are so powerful because y'all have aunts and uncles and cousins and family members that have lived to a degree like in ignorance.
Sure.
And like group chats that could be infiltrated and be like, hey, have you ever thought of this? Wait, have you ever thought about it that way? No, what you're saying makes total sense. I think that we just have to take it upon ourselves, you, I, and the rest of kind of our generation, to make this change. Because like if we don't, nobody's gonna make it for us.
Yeah, well, it's just gonna happen again in another 5-10 years.
Yeah.
So like what needs to happen now? Let's make it so we don't need to have this fight again in another.
Again, yes. It's kind of like when you end it.
Right, yeah.
It's like when there's nothing worse. And here's the thing. It's kind of like when you get food poisoning, you're sick for a day and like it's 24 hours and it's gone.
Sure.
But this is one of those like lingering illnesses.
This is
You
like
know, like
on or always.
I've never had mono, but I hear it's terrible.
Yeah.
Um, but yes, this is like that. I guess. Did you have any questions for me that you've heard, you've seen, you've thought? Because so that those of y'all that are watching, I released a video. If you haven't seen it, uncomfortable conversations with the black man.
Yeah.
Like I told y'all earlier, now has 13 million views. It's been crazy, and I just wanted to create a safe space for dialogue like this. I
Yeah.
wanted to create a safe space to be like, look, my guard is down. Like, ask me what you'd be too scared to ask someone else. Do you have a question that you've seen, thought, heard?
I definitely that one tweet about, someone telling me that calling someone a black person is offensive. That was definitely, I stopped to think about it and I was like, oh, I obviously want to make sure I'm not doing the wrong thing here. Like, is that offensive? So, but again, I didn't think that it was offensive, but I'm glad you
Yeah.
provide your view on that. But I guess coming from you, what would you say right now that maybe other people in my position or some of my followers, fans who are white, like what would you like to see from my generation of white people and people who aren't colored? What can we do to best support the black community right now?
I think if we really want to make change, if I was a main legislator and I was running like a communist society where there's one person in charge, you'd have to like mandate integration. I would seek out a way to integrate my groups,
Yeah.
to integrate my friendship circles. If you're watching this and you're on a sports team, like find a way to make that sports team as integrated as possible. If you're watching this and like you go to church that has small groups, make those spaces integrated. Find ways to blend in with other communities. Find ways to let other communities blend in with you. There's no quick fix. Really. It's a matter of, okay, I know that I don't know about this culture. Let me go blend in with it. When I played in the NFL for the Philadelphia Eagles, I walked into the cafeteria and all our meals are there and it's all prepped and stuff. And all the white people were sitting at a table and all the black people were sitting at tables. And there were like 60 of us. And it's because you go to who you're familiar with, to who you're culturally friends with. And there came a point in time where I was like, you know what? Let me just go hang with the white people, see what they're talking about.
Sure.
Now, they was talking about country music, but thankfully your boy knows how to two-step because I live in Austin, Texas. And so if I'm encouraging your followers, encouraging you, it's a matter of find a way to integrate and blend your spaces. It's not enough to say, I'm not racist, or like, I don't say the N word, or, I'm not this. It's find a way to be proactively enhancing diversity. Like, that's the best way to learn is through experience. So that would be my main lead. And then also, listen, be quick to listen. Like, everybody right now is saying, don't just post a hashtag to post a hashtag. Because we don't need no more hashtags. We don't need no more movements. Like, we need real hearts, like listening, real people understanding. So that would be like my call to action, if you
Yeah.
will.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. Thank you so much for talking. And I so appreciate it. I think, again, it's important to have the uncomfortable. I mean, for me, it wasn't necessarily uncomfortable, but I mean, I think it's important for people who are white and are maybe not educated about it to go out of your comfort zone and ask about it, talk about it, make it a discussion, go out of your way to, get your questions answered. Like, I love that
Yeah.
you're up, you're like, I'm willing to talk about it. If you have questions that you would feel afraid asking anyone else, like ask
Yeah.
me.
Like,
That
just,
really
just
presents,
ask me.
I think that really, because it can be intimidating, and I think it really presents like a very caring, just like open and knowledgeable conversation, which is how you achieve things. It's how you get things done.
Yes.
I
Yes.
think, again, your message of like ask me questions, let's talk about it, is so important, and so I really commend you for that, and really really appreciate you chatting.
Thank you. And yeah, save this video so I can repost,
I
share,
hopefully,
and all of that.
sometimes I hope it doesn't do this to me. When I click end, sometimes my screen goes blank, but I'll
Hey, is
hopefully.
your book already out?
No, it comes out in September.
And what is it about?
It's a poetry book.
Really?
Yeah.
So like all poetry, like pages
Yeah.
of poetry.
Yes.
That, that's dope. How long did it take to write?
About a year and a half. But like I used poems that I had written from years prior to put it together, so it was kind of a work in progress over a couple of years. But
Do
and
you
your
have every do you have every poem memorized?
no, latest that would be weird. But what because you have a book out, or you do have a book already out.
So I'm going to turn this conversation into a book, not this literal conversation, but like uncomfortable conversations with a black man. I'm going to turn this dialogue into a book because what I've seen is I want to take all the several of the questions that I've been asked, the overarching ones, and I want to answer them in a book. And then at the end, I'm going to post so many of the responses that I've gotten after mine. And like people have been, the responses have been so life giving. So I'm going to turn this conversation because I want to make sure people for generations to come have a safe space to answer their questions so nobody lives in ignorance.
So
But a poem book is way more lighthearted. So I will
not
pre-order.
necessarily.
Uh-oh.
Poems can be pretty dark. Not like happy frolicking through the springtime poems are a little bit darker than that, but not as significant as what you're doing. So again, I can't wait to read you. When does your book come out? Do you have a date?
Man, we're gonna try to turn it around in overdrive so people will know, people can see, they can follow, and just I'm probably gonna do my next series of uncomfortable conversations live.
Yeah,
So I'll just say like be on the lookout for that. I want to do it like live, have a not a real audience, but like everybody join me on your phone in your living room.
sure.
Let's just have a conversation.
I love that.
Um, but yeah, thanks for having me. I'm sure we will be in touch, my friend.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Have a good night.
Bye.
Stay
You
safe.
too.
Bye.
Bye.